I'd like to begin this video with a quote from Carl Jung on dreams, Jung's work often being a very important influence on Berserk itself. The dream is often occupied with apparently very silly details, producing an impression of absurdity, or else it is on the surface so unintelligible that it leaves us thoroughly bewildered. Hence, we always have to overcome a certain resistance before we can seriously set about disentangling the intricate web through patient work. When at last we penetrate to its real meaning, we find ourselves deep in the dreamer's secrets and discover with astonishment that an apparently quite senseless dream is in the heightened degree significant, and that in reality it speaks only of important and serious matters. The evolutionary stratification of the psyche is more clearly discernible in the dream than in the conscious mind. In the dream, the psyche speaks in images and gives expressions to its instincts which derive from the most primitive levels of nature. Through the assimilation of the unconscious contents, the momentary life of consciousness can once more be brought into harmony with the law of nature from which it's too easily departed from, and the patient can be led back to the natural law of his own being. The dream shows the inner truth and reality of the patient as it really is, not as I conjecture it to be, and not as he would like it to be, but as it is. The dream is specifically the utterance of the unconscious. Just as the psyche has a diurnal side, which we call consciousness, so also it has a nocturnal side, the unconscious psychic activity, which we apprehend as a dreamlike fantasy. Dreams are often anticipatory and would lose their specific meaning on a purely causalistic view. They afford unmistakable information about the analytical situation, the correct understanding of which is the greatest therapeutic importance. Dreams are, invariably, seeking to express something that the ego does not know and does not understand. Last time, we began our journey into the deeper aspects of Casca's mind, into the corridor of dreams. But this next chapter begins back on Elfhelm, where they have decided to hold a banquet-like party for their new guests. And it is really interesting seeing Roderick's crew intermingling with all the mythological astral creatures here on the island. It's such a departure from the idea that every single astral being wants to savagely murder you. And again, it shows us there is a positive side to it all, and a way to incorporate humanity alongside magical beings, if that were the case. Perhaps similar to the way the world used to be thousands of years ago. Away from the gathering, of course, is Guts, who is sitting alone, staring at the spirit tree, where Casca is currently undergoing her procedure, for lack of a better word. And here is actually one of my favorite scenes in the entire manga. I'm not even kidding. Serpico and Roderick walk up to Guts wanting to share a drink with him, and we get this amazing moment of these three guys just chilling out and reflecting on their lives and their journey together. And I love moments like this. I love to see the characters I adore just hanging out. It doesn't always have to be about the plot. I love moments where it takes time to breathe and lets the characters feel like real people. And as far as a dark fantasy manga filled with demons is concerned, this is a very real moment. Because in this moment, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that there is a feeling that for Guts, Serpico and Roderick are no longer just companions on his journey, but maybe actually friends. People he considers as close to him as perhaps Judo and Pippin were once. They have faced life or death situations together, and they have also had a role to play that without them, they may not have made it this far. Guts reflects all the way back to the beginning of the manga, even showing a brief panel of him facing off against the Snake Apostle. This helps the entire manga feel like one cohesive story, and it also can act as a setup for the endgame that may be arriving shortly after. But Guts recounts on his own he was willing to die in pursuit of his vengeance, but after going back to Casca, and with the inclusion of new members into his group, he had to leave that piece of him behind and be able to rely on other people. A well-given thanks is needed, to which Serpico replies, questioning if Guts is drunk already. I just love that little back and forth that they have, and even Guts can be comfortable enough to joke around with them. Especially Serpico, who has actively stated plenty of times that he would kill Guts once before. And speaking of Serpico, he reflects on his journey as well, how during their days under the Holy Sea Knights things were a lot simpler, but when Farnese met Guts and began questioning not just her faith but her place in the world, it allowed her an outlet to discover who she was as a person and what she deemed as valuable. And that Casca also helped Farnese find a purpose within her own life, having somebody to watch over and protect. Similar to Guts' current purpose, it's as if caring for, watching over, and protecting the people you love is within itself purpose enough to keep on living. We get the least amount of reflection from Roderick, but the man is such a Chad that we understand he has too many epic, amazing stories to tell in just a few pages. But he does admit that risking their lives on the high seas for a woman is the kind of thing that makes him feel alive. What a motherfucking boss. The man is literally willing to fight ghost pirates and go into the mouth of a sea god, all for his duty as a man to protect the ladies. Roderick is a goddamn hero of the people, you guys. But as they talk among each other, Guts' gaze goes back to the cherry tree, recounting the words of Skull Knight that Casca's wish may not be his wish. Is Guts' wish to be with her again like they were before? To be in a working relationship? Or is Guts' ultimate wish to finally finish what he started and get vengeance on Griffith? And as for Casca's wish, well, we just have to wait and see. Within Casca's mind, Shirake and Farnese must travel the wastelands that represent the emptiness of Casca's current state of mind, ripped away by the single traumatic event that they are here to find. And piece by piece, they will find other prominent memories as they go. The first they find is the campfire that illuminated a memory of Guts sitting on a hilltop overlooking the Band of the Hawks camp, from one of the most important chapters of that era, the Campfire of Dreams. Now, how this works is fairly interesting in that Shirake and Farnese are within Casca's mind and therefore connected to her on some level of feeling and emotion as well. As they witness this memory, they feel their heartbeat and the tender warmth that Casca felt in that moment. It was probably the first moment where Casca recognized her feelings for Guts. In the original chapter, the two stand over top of the camp and relate to each other, and relate that the bonfire is like a single dream of each of the Band of the Hawk members, and that all the fires together create the greater dream of Griffith and his desire for his own kingdom. The tragic fact here being that despite all of these men having dreams of their own to achieve, they are swallowed by the greater fire of Griffith's dream. But here was also the moment where Guts admitted that he felt like he didn't have one. He didn't know what he was fighting for, and he wanted to find out. It being too soon to realize that the reason for him to fight was standing right here next to him, Casca. Casca gives him strength in that she grounds him and suppresses the darkness of his mindless killing. This is why the Beast of Darkness is so adamantly wishing for Casca to be destroyed. With Casca around, the beast within Guts can never assume complete control. And of course that beast is an aspect of Guts as well, and perhaps his true test is to tame it in spite of Casca's presence, but that's a situation for another time. Here we are focusing on Casca's feelings, and with them being shared from an important memory, a fragment of the Casca doll is dropping at the girl's feet. The Guts hound along with them picks it up and scratches at the coffin that he carries, and as the chibi Casca runs from the dog, he still places the piece where it needs to go, slowly beginning to reassemble the broken Casca doll, putting her back together, restoring the important memories that make up who she is as a person. Essentially, this is the opposite of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. In that film, an operation team go into a man's mind to erase his memories one by one. In this scenario, we are restoring Casca's memories and piecing her back together, each memory having a significant impact in her life, and without, she wouldn't be the Casca that we know. To block this from happening, there are flying monsters that loom above them, serving as part of the mind that does not wish to restore these memories. And in a way, I think they serve as protection, as in the entire reason for the memories being blotted out wasn't due to anything supernatural. Casca's mind was brought into a regressed state because the trauma was too much for her to handle. So in essence, a regressed state of mind is the body's way of protecting itself, to remove the source of pain and discomfort. The body does not care about its stability as much as it cares that it continues to survive. Casca's mind broke in that the only way for her to conceivably go on was to not be able to think about these horrific events. Think about someone with agoraphobia, the fear of leaving their own house. To protect itself from the anxiety induced by going outside, the mind makes the body feel as though it's almost physically incapable of leaving the home. It's trying to avoid panic attacks and further breakdowns. But also to stay in that state of being is equally dangerous in that you will never be able to be your true self again. Shirke and Farnese are here to metaphorically break through the mental block that Casca's body has put up. And that's why I think these chapters are really something special, because even though magic is at play, the idea behind healing someone's mind is understandable and in the way that they must go about it. This portion of the story also serves as a look back at Berserk as a whole, and how far that we've come in the story. From the memory of Casca meeting Guts for the first time, to the Battle of Doldree, and Casca's victory over Adon. I love the inclusion of the girls saying Casca felt disgusted around him, and each time the girls are feeling the emotion that Casca felt during that memory, connecting them to her and giving them greater understanding about the impact of the memories. The memory of her first meeting of Griffith, her white knight savior at the time, the man who originally gave her purpose and whom she loved before Guts. How important the fragment from this memory must have been, and the rush of conflicting feelings surging through Farnese and Shirke as they discover this. More important memories are shown to us in a montage. The feeling of victory at the Midland Banquet after the Battle of Doldree, when Casca and Guts were stuck in the cave together, Casca's feeling of jealousy that Griffith gives Guts all of his focus and attention, taking away Casca's place even further, unable to be Griffith's woman or his right hand, as Guts represented first someone who took everything away from her, but then became her everything. Guts was willing to fight 100 men to protect Casca before he even realized why he was doing it. The 100-man fight, I still stand by that. This was Guts fighting for Casca as a precursor and foreshadowing of what his life would become. Guts himself just didn't realize it at the time. It was innate within him. The irony that the whole her wish may not be your wish thing, as Guts wishes to protect Casca, but he told Casca to run so that she could go back to what her wish was at the time, to be with Griffith. Guts couldn't let her die because he wanted her to be happy. He wanted her to fulfill her dream. But like I said, Guts just didn't realize what the reasons were behind his decision yet. That's my interpretation of it anyway, as all these videos have ever been. Nothing more than how I view the story and decide to share it with you. Never take me as some sort of authority source on Berserk, please. The memory of Guts versus Griffith before Guts left the Band of the Hawk, Farnese feels the deep confliction and sadness within Casca at the time, and knowing that she had to watch Guts walk away, it was a feeling of incredible loss, which leads into the next memory at the waterfall, where Casca battled Guts and then confided within him, willing to end her own life over the stress of having to lead the Band of the Hawk and the lack of purpose that she felt, with knowing that her dream would never be fulfilled, but saved by Guts once again, and falling for the man that has always been willing to bleed for her, always been by her side, and always protected her, as a comrade and as a lover. And even though this page turn here is hilarious, and it goes into Casca's memory of when her and Guts had sex, and Farnese covering Shirike's eyes, but it also makes Farnese fully realize the relation between Guts and Casca. Yes, Farnese has always known the truth, but Guts being the silent man that he is and Casca unable to communicate, it was never explicitly confirmed to her. Because I think it's pretty obvious that Farnese has a giant crush on Guts. I mean, who wouldn't? She even zapped herself back into her physical body once on the ship, not wanting to hear Guts' answer to Roderick's question, what is Casca to you? Because knowing that Casca and Guts are lovers could signify the truth for Farnese that, well, one, she and Guts will never be an item, But also, if Casca is healed, she will lose her role as a caretaker. Farnese has the subtle feeling that restoring Casca, that her own purpose and wish will be taken from her. Even trying to say that what she feels is Casca's feelings alone, trying to convince herself to stop feeling what she does for Guts because soon, it's not gonna matter. If Casca is back, then her and Guts will continue where they left off. Or at least, that's how it seems to Farnese, and that fear of losing her place in the group because of it. But more and more, the memories of the glory days are gone through, and Shirke has been using her traditional magic spells to make it through the creatures in their path, from golems to the fire wheel to water spirits, so far all serving to protect them well. The girls mention it feels like they've been traveling for months, as time is truly ambiguous in a dream world. But they see in the distance what looks like a tower, and above it is the eclipsed sun. And as the doll is almost assembled back together, that leaves the darkest hidden memories to get to, the ones that caused her mind to break. Before they go there, the little chibi Casca inside the doll grabs their attention, and for the first time, it speaks. An indication that Casca is on her way to be restored. And chibi Casca simply says there is somebody that she would like to see. Farnese, of course, assumes that she is talking about Guts, and that she will see him when this is over, but Chibi Casca could also be referring to what she has always been drawn to even in her regressed state, which is her child. As the girls move through a landscape of corpses and thorns, they are confronted with more manifestations of Casca's subconscious. Getting closer to the event that actually broke her mind, the subconscious creatures also begin to represent that said trauma.
That's a penis!
And by that I mean, yes, they're dicks. This is one of those moments in the manga that is simultaneously poetic, disgusting, and unintentionally maybe a little funny, just to see literal dick monsters. Especially that they spit. But I think it's also important to remember that Casca was not just raped by Griffith, but it's assumed that she was by multiple apostles as well before that. This makes the idea of the traumatic monster cocks being manifested make a lot of sense, as the apostles are nothing more than indulgent beasts enacting their most primal desires, and having the power to do so. Before Casca even descended into Femto's hands, she was already in a weakened daze from the apostles' abuse. And this poor girl has gone through so much, to imagine that her mind is even possible to recover is the most fantastical thing about this sequence. As the variety of dick monsters increases, Shirke uses her greatest hits to combat them, reminding us of all the various spells she's used over the manga. The golems, the water spirits, the earth spirits, and the flame wheel. And as more and more dicks approach them as if they just opened an OnlyFans account, Farnese decides to release a weapon of her own. A giant Mozgus head. Hey, we're in a dream, anything can happen. And though Mozgus represents a former era of Farnese's life, and being able to use that to her benefit has some significance, I just can't get over how on this page we literally get to see Mozgus eat a bunch of dicks. How many times did we wish this would happen back in the Conviction arc when he was on one of his preaching rants? I love to see it. Shirke and Farnese travel through more and more of the thorns, trying to keep them away, the mind protecting itself from having to become aware once more and deal with the truth. And then they see their goal. The final fragment, protected in a casing of thorns underneath the eclipse, very similar to the womb-like imagery that we saw when Griffith was going through his transformation into Femto, as I suppose the eclipse signifies the creation of both. And soaring above them to keep them away is the gigantic manifestation of what I think we can safely call a true Hawk of Darkness. Femto here is represented by the biggest and most powerful creature within the dreamscape, and in a pure falcon-like form looking like Rodan circling above them, spreading a miasma that manifests all of the classic apostles that we saw in the eclipse. And remember that the girls are feeling the emotions that Casca had felt. That terror, tragedy, and sense of ultimate powerlessness. Pure fear of being trapped in a hell dimension with no way out. There is a reason that the eclipse is the most talked about and pivotal Berserk sequence, and it's not just because it's when Griffith became a god hand. It's that feeling of absolute despair. But whereas Casca was helpless with nothing but a broken sword, here in the dream world, Shirake and Farnese are at least able to use their magic to the fullest extent to help combat the Apostles, to give them the space to try to drag this coffin up the side of the thorn-filled mountain that they are surrounded by. The Hawk of Darkness targets the coffin itself, making perfect sense as it was Femto that broke Casca's mind, so the natural instinct here for it in the dream world is to break the doll once more. But the Guts Hound tries desperately to defend against it. Farnese lets out more from her bag, first Serpico's cloak to help free the coffin, and then the Berserker armor itself, which in the most badass way ever attaches to the Guts Hound, making a full dog-like version of the armor. And I don't know what to say from here. It's literally full Berserker mode Guts, but as a hound. Its tail becoming the Dragon Slayer, and cannon blasts being fired out of its mouth. It's absolute insanity, and Miura fully embracing the dream scenario in which he has created. Nothing is off limits here, and we just go with it and embrace how fucking awesome it is. Guts battles the Dream Fento in a way that gives us our first battle between Guts and Griffith post-Eclipse. And comparatively, Griffith is still a gigantic, more powerful force despite Guts' power-up. And this whole race to get up the side of the mountain thing here presented is incredibly gripping. There's no actual time constraint on this, but it feels like there is when you read it. Like, can Farnese and Shirake get this coffin to the top before they are run over and destroyed by the Apostles and Femto? Meanwhile, you have the Guts Hound and the Golems and everything else fighting back. There's just such an intensity to it that I think will be mirrored later on when we get to the real battle in the real world. And to make things even wilder, we have something very special happen from Shirake's hat. And this is the return of Flora. And by return, I truly mean that. This is something new as far as the lore and understanding of the Berserk world is concerned, and yet it does align pretty well with what we know already. Flora had passed away when her mansion was set on fire, and with her last bits of magical energy, she was able to use that fire like a barrier, letting Shirake and the others escape. Upon her passing, she told Shirake that they would meet once more in her dreams. Now, we know that dreams themselves are a way to connect multiple consciousness together, and while you were asleep, you were more in tune to the astral world. Messages were able to be sent to all of mankind via dreams, giving them a premonition of Griffith's arrival to the world. Also, the Pontiff of the Holy See received a specific vision of what Griffith represented. So, dreams in general grant people closer connection into the spiritual realm. Flora did die, but here in the world of dreams, she is able to interact, and truly interact, with Shirake once again using fire as a barrier to protect them. Also, de-aging to a much younger version of herself, probably an image of when she was at her most powerful many years ago. So, what can you say? That this is perhaps Flora's spirit or soul? Or maybe a lingering bit of energy that she saved up upon her death specifically for this moment? Whatever the case may be, Flora allows the girls to get to the demon child encased inside of a womb of thorns. And we see it in its original ugly fetus-like form, which we haven't seen for quite some time. Reaching forward to touch the baby, representing the final fragment of memory, Shirake and Farnese are caught in a whirlwind of memories. The entire eclipse flashing before them, ready to sweep them up in its torment at any moment. Everything is on display, and the horrifying truth is given as Farnese even sees what Casca saw the moment that her mind broke into pieces. That image of Guts screaming out for her, pinned down by an apostle. And that moment, the child transforms into a heart which is still wrapped in thorns. And Shirake immediately notices that this is something not good and likens it to a curse. Casca's sanity and her memories are unable to coincide for a reason, the immense pain that it would give her. Remember, all this is about her body protecting itself, and this is not about flipping a magic switch and having Casca go from potato to normal in a moment. I also think the symbolism here is pretty obvious, protecting her heart. They can bring back her mind, but from a symbolic point of view, a broken mind and a broken heart are slightly different. A broken mind gets rid of who you are as a person, but you can still feel the emotional spectrum and even happiness. A broken heart brings nothing but despair. Clearly the heart and the child are linked, and I also think it does have to do with Guts. The protection here, I think, is stopping Casca from realizing, one, that the child and Griffith are sharing a body, or that Griffith was responsible for corrupting the child to begin with, And the second is that Guts, in his moment of weakness, also violated Casca once. These are the things that I believe will continue to be locked away, for now. She will have to face these truths as she recovers outside of the dream world. Now, this is just my opinion and my interpretation. You may think differently, and I could definitely be wrong, but I definitely think the thorns protecting the heart directly relate to both the child and to Guts in different ways. But as the kaiju femto begins to descend, they don't have time to question what to do about the thorns, and Farnese is the one who makes the decision. And to briefly reflect on her history, Farnese, coming from a noble family that ignored her and left her to her own devices, all she wanted was the attention and acceptance from the adults, and through that she never found her own identity. She only did what would allow her to receive the most praise, until Guts showed her the truth of the world that she had no idea existed, and the value of standing up and fighting for yourself. To instead of using your hands to pray, to use them to pick up the torch and keep the darkness away yourself. Farnese has far and away the most character development out of any character in Berserk except for Guts himself, and she is the one to decide to complete the mission, to bring Casca back whatever the cost. She places the heart inside of the Casca doll and gives a farewell to the Chibi Casca, representing the departure of Casca's potato self, and allowing the real Casca back into the physical world to open her eyes from this long nightmare. Casca, the brave and beautiful warrior and best girl of Berserk, finally awakens, looking up at the fantastical surroundings of the inner workings of the spirit tree. And after only one day on Elfhelm, months inside the dream world, and 22 years in real world time, she finally comes back to us in the story. Also, fun fact, the chapter where we first see Casca lost her mind was called Awakening from a Nightmare, whereas this chapter, directly after the Nightmare of the Dreamscape, is just called Awakening. But she speaks actual lines of dialogue, thanking those around her and assuring her she remembers everything as her time as Elaine, the name that Luca gave her to represent the broken Casca. They ask her about her memories, and Casca mentions that right now that things are very muddled. And as for the traumatic past, she can only remember up to setting out to rescue Griffith from the dungeon, meaning quite a large gap is currently missing. But instead of making her dwell on it, Farnese mentions Guts, which brings Casca to joyful tears, and she wishes to reunite with him. Denon uses her magic to give Casca an Elfhelm-style dress, and we get a great callback with Casca feeling awkward dressing in a very feminine way since she's used to being in armor and being a warrior. Danan reaches out to Guts telepathically to meet at the entrance of the tree, and as Casca makes her way out, her memories like bubbles come flooding into her. Her life as Casca of the Band of the Hawk, and as Elaine, the companion of Guts' group, all flow together, like two lives of two different people meeting in the middle. And in the middle of all that, Casca feels a calling that there is someone that she wants to see. This is the true reunion that we have been waiting for. Some for literally 22 years. Guts is seen in the distance, and Farnese, Shurikei, and Danon all wait in the distance, allowing for Guts and Casca to see each other once more. When Casca sees him, she calls out and begins to walk towards him, but in typical Berserk fashion, nothing is as pleasant as it seems. Upon looking at Guts, it triggers more memories and Casca to come to the surface. Flashes of both Griffith and his dungeon cell, and the surroundings of the eclipse with Guts in the center. It would seem that the remaining memories of Casca are brought out upon seeing Guts. Guts is, after all, more of a link to those events than anything else. The Berserker armor may also play a part in just the visual imagery of it, representing the darkness within him. Whatever the case, Casca still has issues that need to be resolved, and she collapses to the ground as this chapter ends. We are left with this. We have a fully functioning, walking, talking Casca. Casca, the character, is back. She knows who she is, and she's able to communicate and even fight. This was the goal of the Corridor of Dreams. We have the character of Casca back in the story, and that in itself is an absolute win. What we do not have is a complete reset of events of the eclipse, and this is a good thing. If trauma could be fixed with magic, I think it would defeat the purpose of many of the core themes of Berserk. Berserk is largely about the internal struggle of being a human being, our sadness, darkness, and ability to move forward in spite of horrific events that are outside of our control. Guts was allowed to have his development as Black Swordsman to now, and is still invested in the struggle. Casca will have to learn to push forward in spite of her trauma and metaphorically be able to lift the thorns from her heart, and this cannot be done through magic. This has to be done as a human and making hard choices while accepting harmful realities. Even though Berserk is wild with demons and monsters and big penis creatures, its core fundamentals, at least to me, deal heavily with true human issues we face on the internal side. Casca will never be exactly who she was before. As Guts has stated, even if you piece back what was lost, it's not going to be the same. Casca must press forward and develop as a person, as all of our other characters have. And now she is here in the story to be able to do that, rather than just being a potato self. And I, for one, despite the hiatus, am very excited to see where Casca will go, and I know that someday she will be able to look at Guts. Not the same way she did before, but still, without a doubt, with absolute love in her heart. Love for her protector, and the man who risked everything to bring her back.